Hello!
Welcome back to
TTK.
today's video. I don't want punching my hands like this is. I am ready.
We thought we would discuss why K-pop and BTS have not been played on UK radio. We wanted to talk about this because over the past year, we've worked very closely to a leading radio station in the UK, BBC Radio 1.
A bit of history, if you're unaware, we had a podcast on Radio 1. It was called the Peachy Podcast. It's currently on hiatus. But for the last year or so, we dabbled. We dabbled in talk about K-pop to the point where we had a whole series takeover on series 3 and 4, actually. Yeah, we played a selection of songs, BTS, but also we played, we had a playlist, didn't we?
We played EXO, BTS. We also played BTS and some of the solo tracks for the artists.
Singularity,
Serendipity.
Didn't play Serendipity.
Well, I wanted to.
Oh, Postman. Don't look in. Most of this list is written from our experience, so things we encountered when we requested to play K-pop or BTS specifically.
And the difficulties we ran into. It's quite rare for us to hear on the airwaves songs in other languages. And I think the only times we do hear songs in other languages is when they're in Spanish or language that are a little closer to home.
Well, they are, you say a little closer to home, they literally are.
Geographically.
We are European and Spain is just across the water.
Yeah. It's a language we're familiar with. At school in the UK,
French, Spanish or German?
Yeah, mostly French, Spanish, German,
Don't say Italian.
You don't, no one learns Italian.
It is Italian.
Linda, don't people learn Italian at school?
So that's a fact. So I guess our first point on this little journey is easy listening.
So the general populace, if they're tuning into the radio, they want to listen to something that's one, easy listening and they're familiar with, English or the same old songs, and they don't want to have to commit to this new intrusive sound they're not used to. That's one of the hurdles K-pop is facing. The English is the main language you hear on the radio. However, let's take a look at some of the biggest hits in the past few years that have not been English. Despacito, Spanish. Even Justin Bieber doesn't know what it means.
He literally, wasn't it, there was a video of him on stage and I think he did what everyone does, where you go, Burrito. Also Reggaeton Lento by CNCO and Little Mix,
which was a massive hit,
which
and that was not in English. Well, some of it was, because as we know, Latin music is the fastest growing genre in the world right now. Did you know that?
Is that a fact or are you making it up?
Latin America has the world's fastest growing music market.
Well, there we go.
Picture of Louis Fonsi.
Yeah, okay, so our point was a very long one, but it was that most people tune into the breakfast show and the drive time show for a bit of easy, relaxing listening. Okay, point number 2 is compliance.
Story time.
So, on commercial stations and also BBC stations, swearing is not a good idea. We wanted to play Gashina by Sunmi on Radio 1 with our playlist. The problem was no one in the BBC, understandably, speaks Korean, and normally with the BBC, songs get looked at by a few people before they're played on air.
Turns out, Gashina, I think means whore or bitch. So, guess who couldn't play? It was this close to going on air, then someone ran it through Google Translate and they were like, the song Niki and Sammy asked for actually means bitch or whore, so we can't play that. And I was like, it's a really good song. What about Siren? There's not enough Korean speakers in these stations to sound check the songs, proof the songs before they go out on air. So it could be in Korean saying all sorts of things and no one would know.
All kind of nasty words.
So our producer exactly said they can be held accountable if they play a swear on a breakfast show. For example, even if it's in Korean, plus older people listening to the station simply don't get it. And this is the biggest problem that I see in the UK. The main demographic for listening to K-pop and BTS and other bands tends to be younger. And then the question that I raised there is, are these young people even listening to radio? Why do you want BTS and K-pop played on the radio if it's only going to go out to an older audience and possibly, most likely in the UK, receive a negative response?
Yes, most school kids will know who BTS are.
Yes.
Even though it's really popular with young people, if they're not listening to the radio, there's no reason for it to be played on the radio. Does this make sense? However, this takes me on to my next point, which is the Radio 1 remit. If you do a quick Google, you can find out the BBC Trust website, which lists the remit for Radio 1.
And that's what the public broadcaster decides each of these stations and outlets is going to focus on and what they need to bring to the forefront for their audience.
The remit for Radio 1 literally reads, blah, 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 blah. It's to entertain and engage a broad range of young listeners with a distinctive mix of contemporary music and speech. Its target audience is 15 to 29. I'm not going to read all of it, but there's just one condition that I am going to read. It says Radio 1 should broadcast at least 60 hours of specialist music each week.
That's like 3 days worth.
So specialist music in this case is music which appeals to specific groups of listeners, focusing on a specific genre of music or on cutting edge music from a range of genres. So that is why, out of all of the stations in the world, Radio 1 probably will be the one that plays the most K-pop in the UK.
Interestingly, I think the general understanding in Western media until recently has been that K-pop is a fad and it's not worth taking seriously unless there's several emerging artists such as BTS that are like gatekeepers to the industry, coming up and doing these amazing world tours, selling all this merch, having record numbers of listens. They don't take it super seriously as an industry. However, I do think that is shifting now that young people aren't so Eurocentric.
One thing, quickly going to touch on, sometimes it's quite difficult, and we experience this, to play Korean pop songs because some of them are not available to play in the UK. I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works specifically, but I think they need to be like, this is available for radio play in your country.
It's a catalogue provided by the label. The labels and the management will not prioritise the UK market just because maybe it's one they're not pursuing or it's just not one they're necessarily interested in at the moment.
The music industry in the UK is very important. However, the audience is just not as big as like the US, so you completely understand why a Korean group would go to the US first because they can make more money for their company that way.
We tend to bring this up a lot, but it has its point. And it's not necessarily the person that said it, it's just kind of an indication of what the general understanding of it is. BTS were played on one of the biggest commercial radio station networks in the UK, and the DJ afterwards, probably after seeing a very mixed reaction from his audience on Twitter, either positive from the army and then probably an overwhelming WTF from anyone over the age of 25. He then went to say that, oh, this noise, post the door's locked.
What?
So that breakfast show played that song and the young audience loved it, but on social media you obviously had a reaction that was not super positive, probably because, as we've discussed, on the way into work you want to listen to something familiar. Asking someone to tune in and use their brain to listen to something new that isn't in a language they're familiar with is quite a commitment, I feel.
I have never seen a bigger example of like how polar opposite things are these days with generations and demographics, because online you've got a lot of young people discovering this stuff that probably will never tune into telly, and then you've got an older generation that could do the complete opposite, that will never switch on to anything other than what's on channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So in essence there's only really a few reasons I feel that K-pop isn't as well played on radio.
Culture clash being the biggest one. We just don't really in the UK come across Korean culture.
As soon as you're outside of the M25, which is a big road that surrounds London, that's not as a thing you'll see. You just won't see that regularly.
Malden inside the M25 or outside?
Inside. The second point is that sometimes it's difficult for the radio to even find the Korean songs in the first place because of maybe the company or agency not prioritising a UK market or a European market.
I think it's worthwhile, asking these labels, not actually asking them, is the music even available to be played in the UK before you start tweeting DJs saying play this, play this. And it's not as easy as just pulling a stream off of Spotify and put it on the radio. It needs to be different file types and stuff. I don't really know how it works.
The last point is I feel like the internet going audience that is consuming K-pop as a whole skews younger. Obviously, I'm 26, so I'm not like a teenager listening to K-pop. Massive generalization, but it's kind of true. The audience skews younger. However, we all know that traditional media, aka radio, has an old audience. So there's like this disparity between people that want to listen to it on the radio and people that are listening to radio.
Let us know in the comments what your opinions are on the UK music scene and the lack of Korean K-pop representation. Thank you for watching this video today. This is more of a chatty one, talking about the current situation in the UK and radio and K-pop. We hope you enjoyed it.
Tonight we are going to the Day 6 concert and we will be vlogging. I don't know how much we'll vlog. I did ask on Twitter, which I'll pop up here, what you wanted us to film there, because we know it's a bit disrespectful to film the entire performance. But people want to hear the fan chants, apparently, so that's what we'll try and get on camera.
If you can. It'd be so noisy. Last time we went to Zico, it was so loud you couldn't hear the fan chant.
If this topic was interesting to you, we made a video talking about why we think BTS wasn't nominated for a Brit Award, which I actually found quite interesting. If you like...
You made the video.
Yeah.
If you like this, make sure you press subscribe and also press the bell next to the subscribe, because it helps you know when we put posts on our YouTube channel.
And also, give this video a like, because that is just sharing positivity. Oh yeah, see you on Tuesday for our Day 6 vlog.
Remember, an apple a day
is really good soluble fibre.